In his infamous appearance on The Dating Game in 1978, serial killer Rodney Alcala was at the peak of his horrific crime spree. For most people, September 13th, 1978 was just another ordinary Wednesday. However, for Cheryl Bradshaw, a contestant on the dating show, it was a significant day. Out of the eligible bachelors, Cheryl chose handsome bachelor number one, Rodney Alcala. At that moment, Alcala was concealing a deadly secret. He was a brutal killer who would soon be dubbed the dating game killer. Had it not been for Cheryl Bradshaw's keen intuition, it is highly likely she would have been remembered today as one of Alcala's victims. After the show, she spoke with Alcala backstage. He asked her out on a date she would never forget, but she sensed that the charming contestant was not acting normally. "I started feeling something was off about him," Bradshaw recounted in a 2012 interview with the Sydney Telegraph. "He was behaving really weird. I declined his offer. I didn't want to see him again." Another contestant from the episode, actor Jed Mills, recalled in an interview with LA Weekly that Rodney was a bit quiet. "I remember him because I told my brother about this guy who seemed good-looking but was a little strange. He was always looking down and didn't make eye contact with others." If the dating game had conducted background checks on its bachelors, they would have discovered that Rodney Alcala, described as somewhat attractive but eccentric, had already spent 3 years in prison for the rape and assault of an 8-year-old girl. He had committed similar acts against a 13-year-old girl as well, making him one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives. Yet sometimes, even thorough background checks cannot reveal the entire story. In Alcala's case, there were at least 4 unsolved murder cases that had not yet been linked to him. It can be imagined that Cheryl Bradshaw's rejection probably angered Alcala. Before and after his television appearance, the self-proclaimed dating game killer boasted of killing between 50 and 100 people for pleasure. In a video from his appearance, when asked about his favorite time, he answered, "Night." While such a response might seem innocuous from an ordinary person, it certainly took on a more sinister meaning coming from a serial killer. Rodney Alcala was born in San Antonio, Texas, in 1943. His father moved the family to Mexico when Alcala was 8 years old, only to abandon them 3 years later. Subsequently, Alcala's mother and sister moved to the suburbs of Los Angeles. At the age of 17, Alcala joined the military but was medically discharged after a nervous breakdown due to mental health issues. The highly intelligent young man with an IQ of 135 then attended the University of California, Los Angeles, but he did not stay on the straight path for long. Like many serial killers, Rodney Alcala had a particular modus operandi. His methods included beatings, biting, rape, and strangulation. He often strangled his victims to the point of unconsciousness, only to restart the process once they regained consciousness. In his first known attempt at murder, he succeeded in just 2 of these acts. The victim was Tali Shapiro, an 8-year-old girl he lured to his Hollywood apartment in 1968. Shapiro barely survived her brutal rape and assault, thanks to a passerby who reported the potential kidnapping to the police. Alcala fled his apartment when the police arrived and remained on the run for years afterward, relocating to New York, where he used the name Johann Berger while enrolling in the film school at New York University under Roman Polanski. After being identified through an FBI wanted poster as the man responsible for the rape and attempted murder of Tali Shapiro, Alcala was arrested in 1971, but was only convicted for assault. Shapiro's family refused to have their daughter testify and relive the nightmare, which resulted in the rape charge being unprovable. After spending 3 years behind bars, he served an additional 2 years for assaulting a 13-year-old girl. Alcala then traveled to New York to visit relatives. Investigators now believe that within a week of his arrival, he murdered a college student named Eileen Hoover, who was the daughter of a famous Hollywood nightclub owner and the goddaughter of Sammy Davis Jr. and Dean Martin. Following all this, Alcala somehow managed to secure a job at the Los Angeles Times as a typesetter in 1978, using his real name, which was now associated with a significant criminal record. By day, he was a typesetter, while by night, he lured young girls to be part of photo albums later discovered by police, some of whom remain unidentified, and some of whom have never been heard from again. In the year following his appearance on The Dating Game, a 17-year-old teenager, Leanne Ledham, narrowly escaped a photo session with Rodney Alcala. She described how he showed her his album, which included not just pictures of women, but also pages of naked teenage boys. The police later released parts of Alcala's album to the public in hopes of identifying additional victims. Over the years, only a few individuals have come forward to recount their terrifying encounters with this killer. The case that ultimately unveiled Rodney Alcala's string of murders involved the disappearance of 12-year-old Robin Samsoe, who vanished from Huntington Beach, California, on June 20, 1979, while on her way to a ballet class. Samsoe's friends reported that a strange man approached them on the beach, asking if they wanted a photo shoot. They refused, and Samsoe borrowed a friend's bicycle to quickly reach her ballet class. At some point between the beach and the class, Samsoe disappeared. Nearly 12 days later, a park ranger found her remains, which were partially scavenged by animals, in a wooded area near Pasadena's Sierra Madre. When police questioned Samsoe's friends, a sketch artist created a composite drawing, and a previous releasing officer identified Alcala's face. Between the sketch, Alcala's criminal history, and the discovery of Samsoe's earrings in Alcala's storage unit in Seattle, police felt confident they had found the perpetrator. However, starting from the trial in 1980, the Samsoe family faced a long road toward justice. The jury found Alcala guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced him to death. Nonetheless, the California Supreme Court overturned the verdict, believing that the jury was prejudiced due to their knowledge of Alcala's past sexual offenses. It took 6 years for him to be retried. In the second trial in 1986, another jury found him guilty of murder again, but this verdict was also overturned. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals nullified it in 2001, partially because the judge in the second trial did not allow a witness to support the defense's claim that the park ranger who discovered Robin Samsoe's remains had been coerced by police interviewers. Finally, in 2010, after 31 years since the crime, a third trial was held. Before the trial, Orange County Deputy District Attorney Matt Murphy told LA Weekly, "The 1970s in California were insane in terms of how they treated sex offenders. Rodney Alcala is a comedic series of missteps that kept him free each time." Rodney Alcala was one of many serial killers who plagued California in the mid to late 20th century. During his time in prison, Alcala published a book titled You the Jury, where he proclaimed his innocence in the Samsoe case. He vehemently opposed DNA testing performed on prisoners to maintain evidence in police departments. Alcala also filed 2 lawsuits against the California prison system. The first was due to a slip-and-fall incident, while the second was for the prison's refusal to provide him with a low-fat dietary menu. Surprisingly, Alcala announced that he would represent himself in the third trial. Despite now having concrete evidence against him in 4 different murder cases due to DNA testing in prison, the prosecution successfully merged these new murder charges with Robin Samsoe's case during the trial held in 2010. During the 2010 trial, jurors went on a bizarre journey. Rodney Alcala, representing himself as an attorney, asked himself questions while referring to himself as Mr. Alcala in a deep voice, then proceeded to answer them. This bizarre Q&A session lasted 5 hours. He informed the jury that he had been at Knott's Berry Farm at the time of Samsoe's murder, feigned ignorance about the other charges, and even used a song by Arlo Guthrie as part of his closing argument. Alcala simply stated that he did not remember killing the other women. The one other witness for the defense, psychologist Richard Rappaport, provided an explanation that Alcala's memory loss could resemble his borderline personality disorder. Alcala was convicted of the 4 murder charges backed by DNA evidence and was also found guilty of Robin Samsoe's murder. A surprise witness at his trial was Tali Shapiro, the girl Alcala had violently raped and assaulted almost 40 years prior. Shapiro was there to testify in support of justice for Robin Samsoe, age 12, Jill Barcombe, age 18, Georgia Wickstead, age 27, Charlotte Lamb, age 31, and Jill Burnto, age 21. The court sentenced Alcala to death once again, for the third time. Since that trial, investigators have continued to link the dating game killer to numerous unsolved murders, including 2 killings he confessed to in New York in 2013. The full scope of his crimes may never be understood. As he awaited execution in California, Rodney Alcala passed away of natural causes at the age of 77 on July 24, 2021. Immediately after, some of his victims spoke out, expressing relief at the final departure of the dating game killer. Tali Shapiro commented, "The planet is undoubtedly a better place without him. It's been a long time coming, but he got what he deserved." Detective Jeff Shyman, who had been working on solving a cold case involving Alcala in Wyoming in recent years, candidly stated, "He's where he needs to be. I'm sure he's in hell." Shyman noted that during police interviews, Alcala would run his finger over the faces of his victims in the photographs placed before him, perhaps in an attempt to disturb and provoke the investigators. Throughout the investigation, Shyman was astounded by Alcala's cold demeanor, ultimately concluding that he could have killed an enormous number of victims we may never know about. "There might be many other victims out there whose bodies we may never find," Shyman reflected after Rodney Alcala's death. "I have no idea what the actual number might be."